Hello and welcome to my basement. I am Pastor Bill Hennessy, pastor of North Presbyterian Church in Williamsville, New York. I'm providing a brief Bible study each day based on the daily lectionary readings that can be found at the PCUSA website, pcusa.org. And today is Friday, May 22nd. So I'm going to look today at a different reading than I've been looking at the gospel readings mostly recently, but today I'm going to look at the Hebrew scripture reading. It is from 1 Samuel. So it's an interesting reading and one that has a lot of parallels actually for the New Testament. So this is from 1 Samuel chapter 2, verses 1 to 10. Hannah prayed and said, "My heart exults in the Lord. My strength is exalted in my God. My mouth derides my enemies because I rejoice in my victory. There is no Holy One like the Lord, no one besides you. There is no rock like our God. Talk no more so very proudly. Let not arrogance come from your mouth. For the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. The bows of the mighty are broken, but the feeble gird on strength. Those who were full have hired themselves out for bread, but those who were hungry are fat with spoil. The barren has borne 7, but she who has many children is forlorn. The Lord kills and brings to life. He brings down to Sheol and raises up. The Lord makes poor and makes rich. He brings low, he also exalts. He raises up the poor from the dust. He lifts the needy from the ash heap, to make them sit with princes and inherit a seat of honor. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and on them he has set the world. He will guard the feet of his faithful ones, but the wicked shall be cut off in darkness. For not by might does one prevail. The Lord, his adversaries shall be shattered. The Most High will thunder in heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the power of his anointed. So that is the Song of Hannah. Hannah was the mother of Samuel, and early in that story, Hannah, we find, is not able to have children, even though she is much loved by her husband. I believe his name was Elkanah. And his other wives are able to have children, but she is not, and they ridicule her for that and humiliate her because of that. Even though she is the best loved among Elkanah's wives. And she prays that God will change that for her. And she goes to the tabernacle at Shiloh. This is early in the Israelite history. So Samuel is sort of a bridge between the time of the judges and the time of the kings. So he's an important figure, a prophetic figure in Israelite history. And so it makes sense that his birth would be unusual and so have some sort of special kind of meaning. So Hannah is without child and she's very upset. And then after praying at Shiloh, she goes back and she becomes pregnant. And this is her song upon discovering that she is pregnant and about to deliver a child. So Hannah's song is very similar to Mary's song, what is also known as the Magnificat in the Gospel of Luke. And it has a lot of the same sort of themes to it. This idea that God will reverse the fortunes of everyone. that God brings down the mighty and lifts up the lowly. The Lord, some of the things that are said here are just really powerful. The bows of the mighty are broken, but the feeble gird on strength. Those who were full have hired themselves out for bread. That is, people who once had plenty now are begging for bread. But those who were hungry are fat with spoil. The barren has borne 7. The barren has borne 7. But she who has many children is forlorn. So this sort of reversal of fortunes that God accomplishes is what Hannah is celebrating. This is a common theme throughout Scripture, and it's really sort of thematic for the entire life of Israel. Israel is always understood throughout the Hebrew Scriptures as sort of the underdog, a ragtag bunch of slaves who have been pulled out of Egypt not because they rebelled or because they, led a revolution, but because God decided they were going to be rescued. So, God has this special relationship with a people who, by all appearances, have no special qualities at all. And in fact are often sort of on the short end of things throughout their history. And yet this is the community that God chooses to elevate, to make God's own, to make a claim on. That kind of mentality really is present throughout all of Scripture, not just in the Hebrew Scriptures, but also in the New Testament. It carries over. And throughout the Gospels, we have that same kind of mentality that seems to persist. What does that mean for us? How do we understand ourselves in light of that history, that tradition? What does it mean to be part of a faith that understands God as taking a special interest in the downtrodden? For those of us who aren't in that category, how do we sort of embrace and embody that faith when in so many ways we're the ones who are being brought down by those descriptions? And many of us, especially in our Presbyterian tradition in this country, we're pretty wealthy and have had a lot of political and economic power in our society. What does it mean for us to claim a God who brings down people like us? What does it say about the kind of lives that we're called to live? Do we resist that activity of God in the world, or do we cooperate with it? Do we move out of the way? Do we allow God to work through us to ensure that the downtrodden, people in need, people who are vulnerable or are forgotten or neglected, are given the resources they need to be lifted up? What is it that we're called to be in light of a song like Hannah's? I think those are questions that we need to answer over and over. Every generation has got to come to terms with that kind of imagery. When we are in a position of power, our relationship to God and to the God we experience through Scripture it needs to be, I think, given special critique. The danger, I think, is that we in power will turn God into our mascot, into a symbol of our, I guess, I want to say of our strength, and not a challenge to our position. And that's largely what people in power have done over many centuries to tame God, to take imagery like this and either give it sort of symbolic meaning, or ignore it altogether. Our society has really wrestled with what the place of faith should be in public life, and there are a number of Christian leaders, my own colleagues, who believe that Christianity ought to be given special favor, and not just any Christianity, though, a particular brand of Christianity, and should be given special status in society, and others should conform to that. I think that becomes arrogant very quickly, and it turns our faith into some kind of affirmation of wealth and acquisition in a way that I don't think I don't think our faith is intended. When I read things like Hannah's song or Mary's song, what I hear is people in positions of power are going to be deeply challenged by this God, by a God who cares for the poor, who has a special concern for the poor, and for the outcast, for really all those folks that these fundamentalist Christian leaders would like to silence. That's simply not an acceptable place to be, as far as I'm concerned. We need to be mindful of our privilege and be willing to let it go so that others can have access to the kinds of resources and the reins of power that they need, so that their needs are met. And taming God to be in service to the elite, the wealthy, that to me is really the height of arrogance, and it's always a danger. It really is, and I think that's why in Scripture, we don't find a lot of that kind of language. In, for instance, the book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah is speaking out to a society that has become too comfortable in its status as God's people, and believes, therefore, it is immune to threat, and regardless of how it treats its citizens. And Jeremiah tells them over and over, this is unsustainable. You cannot go on treating your poor this way and expect that God will protect you from a threat. And Babylon comes in and overthrows them. The prophets are very clear. The reason Israel falls is because they fail to care for their poor. They fail to look after the most vulnerable. No society can sustain a system where the poor are ignored and are cut out of access to the resources needed to live. We're no exception, and we practice a faith that believes in a God who takes a special interest in that segment of society, in the most vulnerable. And somehow we need to embody that. That's what I hear in Hannah's song. She extols a God who looks after the lowly. It's what I hear in Mary's song. It's what I see in Jesus' ministry, who is, Jesus is constantly accused of, keeping company with sinners, tax collectors and sinners, people who the religious elite around him believe should not be given such attention. We're called to do that. We're called to do it not just through Jesus, but also through Torah, through the whole history, through the whole, the whole thematic arc of Scripture. Over and over, we're encouraged to look after those society would just as soon forget and wants nothing to do with, because God cares for them. So that's what I read when I see the Song of Hannah. I don't know if this begins an exploration of Samuel or not, but it should be interesting if it does. I'd like to do that, because Samuel, as I said, is a pivotal figure in the history of Israel. Today is Friday. I won't be with you tomorrow, and Monday is Memorial Day, so I won't be putting up a recording on Memorial Day either. So Tuesday will be the next time. And until then, friends, I hope that you have a wonderful weekend, that you continue to be well and to stay safe and healthy, and enjoy the peace and presence of God. Until next week, be well.